Yes.
Go in the house.
Thank you. All right. I hereby call the July 6, 2020 meeting and public hearing of the Town of Saugerties Zoning Board of Appeals to order. I've already asked for patience.
Yeah, you don't need to hold it.
I would now like to ask our ZBA secretary, Kevin, who's
If something
hosting.
crazy happens, have mom run and get me or call me. All right, I love you. Good
I'm
luck.
going to
To
mute Joe.
make any necessary announcements. I just lost everyone's pictures.
Oh boy.
There's a little lag, but we're here. So if everyone can hear me,
I can hear you.
Yes.
Yes.
I can't see you.
all right. I have
I
nothing.
can.
I have nothing to add, Jeannie, unless you need further instruction.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to begin with a roll call of the members of the zoning board. I am Jeannie Goldberg, chairperson of the zoning board of appeals for Saugerties. Patty Kelly is vice chairperson.
Here.
Is here. Joe Mahone
I'm here.
is here. Henry Rua,
I'm here.
Tim Scott,
Here.
Holly Struck, who is our alternate.
I'm here. I was on mute. Jeannie, I think I'm getting a lot of feedback only when Jeannie talks. Is anyone else?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think I muted
I
Ken,
do
but I think,
also,
is he in the is he in your room?
I think we need to.
Yeah, I think Ken has to be out of the room.
Goodbye.
It sounds like a microphone is giving you feedback.
No, Ken is on the call, but he's giving the loop.
Yes. Okay. For the record, my husband Ken is online and here
It's still happening, Jeannie.
because I am a technophobe.
You're in the echo chamber, Jeannie.
Okay, I'm going to declare a quorum. Since we have 5 people present, we have a quorum present.
Whatever you did, you made it
Kevin?
work, son.
She's on there twice.
I'm getting terrible echoes.
She's showing up 3 times on the thing.
I'm going to mute the other one.
Give me a moment.
Okay.
Yeah, that's better.
Ouch. Ghosts in the machine.
Is that any better?
Oh.
I really was I'm getting terrible echoes.
No, that's better. But there's still some sort of noise in the background. But let's move on.
Okay, I have welcome to this meeting ×3. I have introduced the members, and I want to tell you that the basic function of the Board of Appeals is to hear appeals and grant relief from the strict application of zoning regulations. I note here that we are all unpaid volunteers donating our time and energy for the good of the entire town of Saugerties. As such, each member is required to have 4 hours of training each year. In addition, we are required to take into account not only the zoning law of the town of Saugerties, but also New York State law, the State Environmental Quality Review Act, and various state and federal law decisions. We are fortunate in having available for advice Town Attorney George Redder, who is here this evening, ZBA Town Planner Dan Schuster, who is also here, and Radio Frequency Engineer Ron Grafe. They are all here with us tonight and may be responding to questions from the board. I ask that members of the public whom we welcome here tonight, please address all questions to the board. We will then redirect them to our experts or the applicants as appropriate. Before we begin, I am designating Holly Strutt, our alternate, to join the regular board for this public hearing and meeting, as Henry Rua, our regular board member, who is also here, was not present for many of the 2020 Verizon cell tower presentations. The only application for tonight's meeting is for Tarpon Towers 2 LLC and Celco Partnerships DBA Verizon Wireless, who propose to install and operate a 120-foot monopole tower structure with related equipment on the land of the Mount Marion Fire Department at 766 King Highway in Saugerties. The legal representatives for Verizon have provided proof that they have made good faith efforts to notify all 29 neighbors within 500 feet of the property line of the Mount Marion Fire Company of this public hearing. Last month, we did the SECRA designation. The designation for is unlisted, and it has a negative declaration designation. This was voted on unanimously on June 1st, 2020. This is making me crazy. Can we turn it down? I'm getting echoes, sorry. Much better. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Good.
Yes.
Okay. One of the legal decisions which we must take into account is the Monroe decision of 1988. Patty Kelly and I will now read from a finding statement regarding this decision. The proposed action. Tarpon Towers 2 LLC and Selco Partnership GBA Verizon Wireless propose to install and operate a new communications facility on the above referenced property. The proposed facility includes the installation of a new 120-foot monopole tower structure and related antennae and equipment necessary to close existing gaps in service in the local area and to relieve substantial capacity issues related to the increased demand and use of Verizon wireless network in the town of Saugerties. The proposed site will provide new coverage to an area within the town of Saugerties that currently lacks acceptable wireless coverage. This will result in significant benefits to Verizon wireless customers, including emergency personnel, i.e. police, fire, and ambulance, who rely on secure wireless communications provided by Verizon Wireless Network. Sorry, this is long, and I'm just reading part of it. In addition to providing new and improved wireless service to the area, the proposed tower facility will be available for use by local town public safety agencies to help improve such agencies' respective communications network. Local police and fire department officials have acknowledged the existence of poor radio communications in the area surrounding the proposed facility. By providing space on the tower free of rent to the local police and other emergency agencies, such entities will have the opportunity to significantly improve radio communication on their individual networks, which will lead to improved service to local residents. Now, the Monroe decision. Going back to 1988, the New York State Court of Appeals issued a decision in the case of matter of Monroe versus the city of Rochester, in which the court established a new balancing of interests, and that's very important, test to allow local municipalities to determine whether a specific project qualified for immunity from local zoning requirements. The balancing of interests test identifies 9 separate factors to be considered to determine whether a specific project qualifies for immunity from zoning. The 9 factors identified by the Monroe decision are discussed in the following. I'm not going to read the whole Saugerties zoning law, but basically it says that the ZBA is qualified, and we shall decide any question as to the proper application of this chapter, which is a zoning law. I will also say that back in 2009, the Town of Saugerties Zoning Board of Appeals considered an appeal in a very similar situation on behalf of the Centerville Fire Company and ZBA Towers 2 to erect a 150-foot communications tower on their property. During its review, the ZBA considered the balancing of interests established by the Monroe decision. On May 7, 2009, they rendered a decision saying that the tower might be put at the Centerville Fire Station, and they were exempt from the rest of the zoning requirements, except for site plan review by the planning board. It was done, the tower was put up. I will now open this public hearing to any presentation that the
Jeannie,
applicant.
did you want me to read the 9 things in the balancing act?
Oh, yes, I'm very sorry.
Okay,
Yes.
I'm just going to go through
Patty
these
Kelly
quickly.
is going to read the balancing.
Well, we've gotten this question a lot from some of the people who have written in, and I know that a couple of you are on the call. So I'm just going to read the 9 categories so you know what they are, and just a very brief explanation of what we're going to have to address in these. This document, when it's finished, will be a document by the Zoning Board of Appeals. It will be our document, and it will state what we want it to state based on all the information we have. So number 1 of the balancing factors is the nature and scope of the instrumentality seeking immunity. Basically, that's just a certification that the Mount Marion Fire Department is a local fire company established pursuant to New York state law. It is a government entity that provides essential public service, and that the fire department is the owner of the property and has the power to lease the property. It also will address Verizon Wireless being a public utility for purposes of zoning under the Rosenberg case, which was a 1993 case, which confirmed that wireless companies such as Verizon provide an essential service similar to other established utilities. Important thing to note as we go through this, the essence is that to be entitled to a variance, the wireless carrier simply needs to demonstrate that the proposed facility is necessary at the proposed location. And the third portion of that number 1 is simply a discussion of the tower itself. It's 120 foot with an antenna on a portion of the property of the firehouse. That property is not utilized by the local fire department. And it will not require any municipal services. Number 2, the encroaching government's legislative grant of authority. This again just certifies that the Town of Saugerties Zoning Board has the power and is the appropriate agency to consider this balancing act. Number 3, the kind of function or land use involved. This talks about we'll have to talk about the construction of the proposed tower, and that they will allow co-location of other wireless companies, for example, AT&T or Mobile, whatever that one is called. An overall summary of the land use at the firehouse. Number 4 is the effective local use regulation would have on the enterprise. This deals with the design that the system designed by the qualified radio frequency engineers to confirm that the property is necessary for a new facility to allow Verizon Wireless to remedy significant service gaps and overutilization of the capacity. Just so that you all know, the ZBA has retained the services of our own radio engineer as a way of double checking what Verizon sent. He's as experienced as the others, but he works for the town. And so he will verify, and if he doesn't agree with things, he lets us know, and we then hash it out with Verizon. Number 5, alternative locations for this facility is in less restrictive zonings. The ZBA requested an analysis of other locations other than the firehouse in the nearby industrial zoning, which is just beyond the somewhat limited search rig that Verizon developed for this project. We're going to talk further about that tonight because we just got the results of that, and our consultant has recently only given us his report. So that's something for us to discuss with the public. The impact, number 6, the impact upon legitimate local interests. There is no question on anybody's side that the Mount Marion cell phone service is inadequate. And as more and more residents use cell phones rather than landlines, it's a legitimate local interest that they are provided reliable cell service that is maintained. That's an easy one for this. Number 7, alternative methods of providing the proposed improvement. This again gets into the feasibility of alternatives. Number 8, the extent of the public interest to be served by the improvements. This will include a more detailed discussion of whether the radio frequency engineer has successfully shown that the tower can cover the significant gaps and remedy the issues that we have in Mount Marion. And the final one, intergovernment participation in the project development and the opportunity to be heard. This includes the public hearing, the fact that the fire department was involved. Verizon spoke to the fire department, they spoke to the building department, they spoke to the police department, and they came before the zoning board last. That's it. Those are the 9 criteria that we will be addressing in the balancing act that we have to under the judicial decree that was done in, as what Jeannie said, 1986 or whenever it was done. So for those who wrote in for it, this will go into the record. All of your questions that you submitted will be part of the record, as will this summary. Okay, that's it.
Thank you, Patty.
You're welcome.
I will now open this public hearing to any presentation that the applicant, Verizon, wishes to make. Ms. Phillips, is there anything you would like to say regarding this application?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. We appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight and to present the project at this public hearing. I can just give some basic information about the project to those people who are in attendance who may not have been following along so closely as members of the board. What we are proposing at this site, and the location is 766 Kings Highway, the Mount Marion Fire Department property. We're proposing the installation of a 120-foot monopole with the lightning rod that would be installed on top. It's a total height of 124 feet, but 116 feet to the center of the antenna. The pole would be constructed in a 50 by 30 foot leased area that the fire department has made available on its property, and it would be accessed by an existing access road that's already on the fire department parcel. As you had mentioned previously during your introduction, there is already a tower, a communications device on the fire department property. But due to its structure and age and height, would not be suitable for use by Verizon or provide the ability for us to install facilities needed to address the coverage gap and gaps in coverage that we have at this location. I apologize. Just staying with that, the facility is needed at this location because we have demonstrated that we need coverage relief at this location and also to fill coverage gaps where the service is currently lacking, and that's largely in the Mount Marion area of the town. We came before the Zoning Board of Appeals because the parcel where this would be located is in the RH zoning district. And under the town of Saugerty zoning law, the telecommunications facility of this kind is not permitted in that district. It's only permitted in the industrial and light industrial district. So a use variance would be needed to construct the tower at this location. As Madam Chairwoman had explained, because this is a public utility, we are subject to the public utility standard that has been established by the Court of Appeals under that Rosenberg test. And so the test is similar in that we would need to demonstrate a need for the facility at this location. Due to the irregular size of the lot, or I should say the shape of the lot, an area variance would also be needed to accommodate the setbacks, which would not meet the setbacks required under the zoning law. As part of our application, we have provided a visual analysis of where the tower would be, the monopole would be visible. For the most part, the visual analysis demonstrates that really only properties within a close proximity to the site would have a real visual of the pole. The farther you get away from the facility, and that view shed analysis did go up to, I believe, 5 miles away, the view of the pole becomes diminished. And in many locations, as we've shown in our visual analysis, it's not visible. And that's with, when you add in the vegetation during leaf-on seasons, it's even less visible from most locations within the view shed analysis. So we have provided some visual simulations of what the pole would look like in the application documents, and that was generated through a balloon test with locations selected through consultation with the town. So in sum, the application provides an overview of what the facility would look like, but more importantly demonstrates why the facility is needed at this location. And it's to fill those coverage gaps and to provide that capacity relief that we have identified in order to serve not only the residents in this area of the town, but also to provide that added capacity for emergency service providers and just to address what we're seeing, which is a large increase in the need for enhanced capabilities at this location. So we're here tonight. We do have our RF engineer, Mike Crosby from Verizon, to provide a little more detailed information about the needs analysis that we've provided, and also supplement on those alternative locations that the board asked us to look at in the industrially zoned district. So we're here to answer any questions if the board has right now, or any questions following comments from the public.
Well, I just have one question. You may have already discussed this with Mr. Olson. The balloon test, we got the pictures from the balloon test. There were errors in some of them, typos, things that said something different than that was shown. We want to correct it, correct it, because we want the official record of the zoning board for the town to be accurate, as you can imagine. We have not gotten those. Ms. Goldberg asked for that, and we have not gotten that yet. So if you could just make a note that that needs to be sent to us.
I can absolutely make a note of that.
We don't need the whole thing, but there were like 4 or 5, I think, that were just incorrect.
Okay, and I will consult.
It was pointed out to them, and okay.
I will confirm that with Scott. I apologize that we haven't gotten that into the board yet, but we do appreciate the need to have the record be accurate, and
Yes,
so we will make sure to have that.
thank you. And also, we'd like to share that with the public, and we really can't do that until we have the whole thing the way it should be.
Of course.
Thank you. Jeannie?
Mr. Crosby?
Sure, I can jump in. Can you guys hear me okay? Sounds like you can hear me.
Yeah, we hear you.
Yes.
Thank you. So at the last meeting, I think it was June 1st, at the last meeting, there was a follow-up item for me, which was to more formally document the differences in coverage, the comparison between two alternate hypothetical locations in the industrial zone versus our proposed Mount Marion Fire Department location. So what I had done is I had actually amended the existing RF justification by adding in slides to that purpose. It's a complex topic when you're trying to discuss, whether you have coverage or you don't have coverage. And the nature of wireless, it's not that simple. And so in an effort to try to convey that visually, it's also a challenging topic to try to convey. And so what I try to do with that presentation, and if it pleases the board, I can try to share my screen with some of that information if you'd like. Try.
Kevin? Can you
I'm gonna
enable
go ahead and try.
Yeah.
Mr. Crosby?
Before you do that, may I ask a question? Mr. Crosby, what you sent us was very, very difficult to read. The map ended up being very small in the upper left-hand corner, and the only way you could enlarge that was to physically enlarge it on the screen, but then you lost portions of the map. And also, Holly had specifically asked at the meeting to take the maps that you've already done from the firehouse and overlay them with a grid that would indicate the industrial zone. What we got was industrial zone grid, and then you would have another slide so that people would have to go back and forth, and we weren't able to get them together. So that was disappointing.
Well, that's partly why, I'm trying to explain that it's not as simple as, a lot of people would like to think that having coverage versus not having coverage is just a black and white type of a topic where you either have it or you don't have it. It's not that simple. And so let me try to share this, and we'll try to get into it a little bit. I apologize for the challenges that it sounds like some people have had. I wish I could help you to overcome that, because on my screen,
Well, it would be helpful
what I put together.
if you sent us hard copies. We definitely need hard copies, both for the file and for us. And
Allison, can you make sure that Scott has sent the hard copies? Because that's not sent by me, Patty. Scott is the one that sends that out. So hopefully that has been done. I don't know.
no, we have not gotten them.
No. I don't know whether Ron has gotten them.
We will confirm if those have been sent, and if they have not, we will be sure to have hard copies provided to the board members.
To the board members?
And to our engineer and
Yes, Dan? And to our attorney, our planner, and a copy for the files. 11 copies, please. I ask once more, 11 copies.
So I'm gonna try to share
Thank you.
the screen.
Yeah, Matt, I've made you a presenter. You should be there. We go.
this does.
The same stuff we've seen.
This is stuff we've all seen before. We should just go right to the map of Industrial Road.
I'm not seeing anything.
So Jeannie, let me know if you can see this. It sounds like your connection might be slow. Might be slow bandwidth, slow internet. That may be causing that echoing that you're experiencing as well. Might take a second for the slides to come up, but I'm on slide 25.
Slide now.
Okay.
We'd like to see the Industrial Road slides.
Okay, so this is Tower Road, so I'm going to skip ahead to Industrial Road.
I'm just going to mention, Mike, that if folks can change their view up in the top right, it might give them a bigger picture of the slides as well.
So right now on my screen that I'm sharing, I'm showing that the slide is full screen. So
Well,
that's what
all we see is a little thing that says Tower Drive. Oh, it says Industrial Drive, but we see a little boxed area and you can't really make out heads or tails from it.
So the slide that's up right now is showing you Industrial Drive at 700 megahertz. And there's two different colors of coverage on the screen, which is what I believe was asked for, which was the red hashed coverage and the green hashed coverage. And in order for this slide to be effective, you have to zoom into the area in question in order to be able to get into the details of where there's coverage and where there isn't coverage and at what service levels we're talking about, not
So
just outdoor.
Can you zoom in?
I am going to zoom in. So if you can see on the screen, you can see there's a red dotted box. In this dash, these red dashed line, this box is the area of increased detail, as it's labeled here, area of increased detail on the next slide. And so
Yeah,
what we're going to do is we're going to,
where on Industrial Drive did you go? Where is this? Because Industrial Drive has a lot of land. So where specifically did you take your measurements from?
that was the slide that I had up initially. I was going to show you that. I don't know, would you like me to switch back to that screen so I can show you?
It would be helpful just to see where you took your measurements from.
Okay, so that was where I was going to start. So if you look at, you have candidates G and candidate H. You have G is Tower Road, and then you have H is Industrial Drive. And this lettering, this label here is approximately the location that I've used. And I would like to remind everyone that this is a hypothetical location. There's no guarantee that we're able to secure land from a landlord there. There's no guarantee that there isn't some underlying conditions with the property that would prevent a tower from being built there, whether it be wetlands or other. So this is a hypothetical. We're comparing a hypothetical to a known buildable quantity, which is our D candidate, which is the primary.
So H is where you took the measurement from?
Approximately, yes.
Okay, and where, at the bottom or top, where would the firehouse be in this map?
Firehouse is D, which is the primary in green here. Can you see that?
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
You can see the search ring that we have here as well. Originally, we were targeting the intersection of Glasgow Turnpike and 87. That was originally where, we originally were looking for property. As we expanded, as we were looking at this area, we obviously, as we discussed previously, we saw that there was an existing tower, at the Mount Marion Fire Department. So,
okay, so that gives
that
us a
answers your
sense
question,
of where
right?
Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to skip back to Tower Road. So this is Tower Road, or Tower Drive. I keep getting those confused, I think, because I have them both ways on the slide. So this red dashed box is the area that we're going to zoom into detail on the following slides and look at increased detail so that we can try to identify where does Mount Marion cover and at what levels versus where does Tower Drive cover and what levels. So on the following slide, and by the way, this is, let me just go back here, see if we have, let's start with, are we looking, I apologize, did you want to look at Tower Road or you wanted to look at?
Industrial Drive.
Okay. So here's Industrial Drive at 700, and all these screens are formatted exactly the same zoom level. They're centered in the exact same spot. The scale is down here on the bottom left. The legend is here to try to help explain what you're able to see on the screen. So if you look at this overview slide, and then you go to the following slide, we zoom into that box. So I'm just going back. We're looking at this specific area in detail, which is some of the most notable differences in coverage. So this 700 megahertz, this is the coverage that we would have from the Industrial Drive location. And you would ask me to provide you with a delta coverage of red and green hashed lines that show areas that the proposed location covers that the alternate location, in this case Industrial Drive, does not cover. And in this case, you can see a 1/3 mile long gap along Glasgow Turnpike that is covered by Mount Marion Fire Department, but is not covered by Industrial Drive. So that's
Hey,
one
Mike?
gap.
I can't even
Yes,
see
sir.
what you're looking at.
Can anyone hear me? This is Ron.
Yes.
Yep.
Thank you. I think I'm,
Ron,
I think I'm unmuted now. The question that I had in my report on this is that indeed you've compared, number one, it's very confusing. We're doing industrial drive. The first map says Tower Drive. Why was that still there? Extremely confusing to the board. It's industrial drive, but go back a slide, Mike. Go
Well,
back
hold
a
on,
slide.
hold on a second. I'm really in the middle of trying to walk through this presentation.
No, but the
And to
fact is,
just jump into details
you're
out
not
of order here.
showing, you're not
I was
showing.
asked to provide information on industrial drive and tower drive. I was not asked to provide just one of those. So I provided both, which I would think would be of benefit to the board.
But
I'll
can
go
you
back
just
a
go
slide,
back
so-
one slide for the convenience of the board? Okay, now this is industrial drive, right?
Correct.
Why does the map say Tower Drive? It's
Well,
so
if we had,
confusing to a board.
well, understood. You can see that the label was not changed. So the label, this was, we were focused on the context of the coverage. And
Okay.
obviously that was a mistake that we made. So that
Another
should say
mistake.
industrial drive. The biggest problem that we have with the presentation is a label, because we can fix that. If we had your comments, I could have gone through this and made some
You
of those
did have my
changes.
comments. I prepared a report on that, and I pointed all of that out. And I also
Well,
pointed
I don't have a
out the fact
copy of that.
this, well, I don't know why, but I also pointed out the fact that the coverage that you show here is naked coverage. In other words, it doesn't show the existing coverage. It just is a comparison of the two sites. It ignores what's already there.
Well, this is what's called best server coverage. So this actually takes into account all the coverage from the existing sites in the area. Every single on-air 700 megahertz coverage for this slide and every single AWS coverage for the other slides is shown as on-air. And it's shown in white, it's blanked out, okay? So that we can focus on the best server deltas of the proposed sites and the alternate locations.
But you're not showing what you have. Look, go back to your first map and you see there's coverage all over the place. And now you've removed the coverage.
This is best server.
There's the issue. Go to your best server. Go to your best.
This is best server.
No,
This is best server of the proposed site.
the overview best server of the whole area. Slide 31 or 32.
That's 31.
No, I'm sorry. Go back to where you first show. No, you've got to go to your first.
35, 36.
Hey, love. Hi, love.
All these slides are designed to work together, and they do work together nicely if you read through and follow this. So if you look at, I suspect that this is what Ron is talking about. And as we've talked about, there's coverage and capacity concerns for this ring, which I really don't think are that confusing. I think we presented it very nicely. So this neg 105 coverage is the coverage that exists in the area now. And so what we've done is we've actually taken all of this into account, and we've evaluated that along with the best server of the existing site with all of these sites on air. So all the coverage you see on this slide is on air, so that we're not showing you what Ron has suggested, which is naked coverage. We're not showing you the site by itself. That's not what we're doing. We are showing you the site as a composite of the network.
It's not your operational coverage. That's your best server. What you need is minus 95 dBm RSRP for.
Which is why we which is exactly why the threshold maps are included, is to show that it neg 85, neg 95, and neg 105, which is corresponded to these coverage descriptions, which are on slide 12, which explains what coverage levels are expected based on each of those thresholds received.
It is just so incredibly confusing to a board. Incredibly confusing. It was supposed to be a relatively simple thing of just, let's see what it looks like in one hash and another hash. And I went through this and I submitted a report. Number one, besides the fact that your last two, your ultimate and penultimate slides, don't even agree with the legends, which you point out later, oh, there was a mistake there. Well, how is the board supposed to understand that? I mean, there are the issues. And then you show Tower Road when you're comparing an industrial site. I mean, how confusing is that? I'm saying, what am I looking at? And you know what? I do this every other day.
Right. Well, Ron, as you know, we work on many sites, and when we put together these presentations, unfortunately, mistakes do happen with the labels, which is what you have there. There's an
Granted, you're
example
right.
of that where,
I'm
and
sorry.
I
You've got
don't have a
great
problem
process.
admitting that there's a mistake with the label. I mean, this happens to anybody all the time. So,
You're right.
we
You're
do
right.
the best we can to try to prevent those things, and we apologize for confusion. If we had Ron's comments ahead of time, we certainly would have adjusted that so that it would have made more sense in the flow for everyone to review. We did find a couple mistakes. There's a lot of slides, there's a lot of detail. It takes a lot to put slides like that together. So we've actually, I think, done an excellent job of trying to show these deltas, because it's not as simple. If we were to take two sites that are a mile apart from each other, that's an easy slide to look at. But when you're taking site locations that are relative to each other, as we have with Industrial Drive and Tower Road, it takes a certain level of detail, which is why in the past I've tried to explain, we know that there are differences in coverage between these locations. It's complex to try to explain those things. Some people can digest that information. Some people don't want to digest that information. Some people like to learn about these things. So we have all different levels of interest as far as viewers are concerned. So we've done the best we can to try to show how this impacts the area. And we see two major differences in coverage. One is along Glasgow Turnpike, where there's a 1/3 gap in coverage from the two alternate locations versus our proposed. The other is in the Mount Marion Park residential area, where there's significant differences in both 700 and AWS coverage. The AWS coverage, as I've mentioned previously, is critical for us in order to provide the capacity that we need in these residential areas, help offload the existing network. If we're to provide just 700 megahertz coverage in that area alone and not improved AWS coverage, we're going to immediately have the same problem with this site as we do with our existing sites, which is to overload the existing network and overload the proposed site. It doesn't make sense to do that. So we propose a location, which is a Mount Marion Fire Department, that allows us to fix this problem, these gaps in service with both 700 and AWS from one location. So and that's primarily due to two reasons. One is the positioning of the site as far as the elevation is concerned. It's about 10 feet higher in ground elevation, which isn't a whole lot, but that combined with the distance to the coverage objectives makes up the reason why you see the deltas. Why do you see the difference in coverage between these proposed location and the alternates that we've been requested to take a look at?
Mike, this is Patty. You said to us at the last month's meeting that you had done this analysis a year ago.
Mhm.
And you were going to find it, and that you were going to, did you find it, or did you have to redo it in the past couple of weeks?
I was able to find
So
the,
this is what you prepared a year ago?
I was able to find the file that we had saved, which is called an ATL file, which is the source file that's saved in our propagation tool. So that file existed. It wasn't in a hard copy format. So I was able to take that information and just zoom in and be able to provide that information. So what you're seeing is the same data that was analyzed a year ago. Yes. It's just
Okay.
the format is formatted for the purposes of what was requested at the last meeting.
So now I'm looking at the map that you have up here on the screen. And in the thing on the right, it says proposed. That's where it would be at the firehouse, the red checks. And then it says the alternate, a light blue. I can't even see a light blue. I can barely make out, and I see nothing.
I don't follow you what you're looking at.
You have the proposed 95 and the alternate. You have a red hashtag for the proposed and blue or green, whatever that is.
Mhm.
But I'm looking at your little postage size stamp there, map, and I can't make out.
Well, if you see this red dashed box, so again, we're looking at an area, a focus area. And that's why, when I try to explain these things verbally during the meeting, I'm explaining these are complex topics to look at. So you have to be willing to try to follow along with this. So that's why I say that it's not as simple as just black and white. So in this case, we have a couple things working here. We're looking at a delta plot, which is the red hash and the green hash. And that's a different format to look at this threshold map, which shows you the different levels of coverage. So we're able to show that in this particular area, if you look at the coverage from Industrial Drive versus, and I'm going to switch screens, the coverage from the proposed Mount Marion, you can see that in one, which is the alternate location, we have below neg 95, which Ron has mentioned is unacceptable service. We have a neg 105 coverage area here, which is not adequate for reliable in-car coverage. And we're showing that with this call out box. Now switch screens again. So you're looking at Mount Marion here where it shows the yellow coverage, which is neg 95 or stronger, which is acceptable in-car coverage. And so you see the call out box, the red and green, remains the same between those two. So what I'm showing you is that from our proposed site, which has the neg 95 or stronger coverage along Glasgow Turnpike versus the industrial drive location, there is a 1/3 gap in coverage along the road in that location. That's one of the specific areas that we're identifying as a delta between those two locations.
Okay, all I'm saying to you is I think you have made this harder than you need to make it harder. When we worked with Verizon on the last cell phone tower thing that didn't go through, they prepared, I know you were not the engineer, they prepared maps that were big, regular maps, 8 by 11. And they put the alternatives over it so that we could see clearly which was which on one map. And they did it for each of the frequencies. We put it in our book so that when we met and talked as a board, we were able to pull out those maps and take a good look at them. Here, toggle this, toggle that. That's not a way to present, in my opinion, to present what you say is a complicated issue in a way that we can understand and the public can understand.
Well, I can
Right
appreciate
now,
what
it
you're saying,
doesn't.
and in many cases, I'm able to present those types of images that you're talking
That's
about.
what was asked for.
But here's the problem. The problem is those images don't provide the level of detail that's needed for this particular site. We adapt as needed. I understand that you'd love to see just one map that shows here it is, here it isn't. It's not that simple with this site, and that's why we have to break it down to different coverage levels in order to become granular enough to explain where does a site work and where it doesn't work at what level. Where does it work? Where doesn't it work in building? Where does it work? Where doesn't it work in car? Where does it work? Where doesn't it work at the street level? The maps that you looked at from the previous engineer were of locations that were so far apart from each other, there was only one level that was looked at. And that's not the case here. We're looking in more detail to try to show exactly the areas that we have identified as part of our coverage objectives for the site, how they are not being served from these alternates. Because if you were to look at that, have coverage, don't have coverage at the street level, which is the slide I have up right now, you can see that level of granularity is not visible in this screen. That's why it was necessary to go into more detail to provide that level of granularity and visibility to the deltas that are the reality. It's when locations are so drastically different that I can just do that in one slide. That's a really easy example of us being able to show you where there is and where there isn't coverage. This one's more complex. It requires more detail in order to provide that information. So even though we've told you that there's a difference, these are the documents that prove that difference.
And if,
May I
and if
make
I
a
can
comment?
just jump in, this is Allison, kind of bringing us back to, why we were looking at these two alternative sites. Under your zoning law, the use is permitted in the industrial zone. The fire department properties in the RH district, but just outside of the industrial zone. So we're talking about, the project area is in very, close proximity to these alternative locations that the board has asked us to look at. And I think maybe what Mike is, getting at is, when you have the sites that you're trying to do, compare alternatives when they are so close, you're looking at the deltas, those differences, and they may be, not obvious or blatant enough where it, like he said, a black and white image, you're focusing in on areas, that we had in the other slide where you have, a stretch of roadway that would be covered by the primary site, but not this alternative. You're looking at very specific differences. And I think that's just due to the fact that, these are actually close in location.
If I may add something to this, if you don't mind.
Please.
I just want to make it clear about the history of this. The reason the site at Industrial Drive and Tower Drive are considered, if you look at my first report that I made to the board after seeing this application, I pointed out that in my review of it, I saw other areas that were within the permitted zone that might very well be possible tower locations. In what indeed was Industrial Drive, where there's a bunch of school buses parked. And I said, wow, look at this. There's nothing here. Could this be evaluated? That was not one of the first sites that you considered. The next one was Tower Road. That was not a site that was considered. In my first report, I mentioned that, and the board, I believe, said, well, why don't we look at those? That is why I believe those two sites are under evaluation today. With respect to the the detail that we're going here, as I pointed out in my report, and I'm really sorry you didn't get a copy, but a hard copy of this report either, so perhaps we're even. The issue is the precision. Go to your next slide where you show that 1/3 mile of gap, okay? That red indicates the coverage that you're getting from the chosen site, and the green is the coverage that you're getting from, I guess it's Industrial Drive. I can't tell because the map still says Tower Drive, but I will just assume it's Industrial Drive. And that would indicate that. But here's where this really gets hairy. Signal in dBm of greater than -85 dBm. That is Verizon's chosen coverage for in-building suburban coverage. -95 dBm is Verizon's chosen level for street or in vehicles. That's in this area. That's what they're using. So, and by the way, since these are they're negative, a bigger number, -85 dBm is stronger than -95 dBm because of the way this works is a negative scale. So the question, what's been shown here, because this is such a small gap, incredibly tiny gap in this overall picture. And I did say in my first report that indeed there were gaps in the coverage. But now when we get down to this granularity, okay, what if the signal strength, remember now these are negative numbers. So -86 is weaker than -85. And -96 is weaker than -95. This is showing us -85. Now, no engineer, I believe, in his right mind would say that if the signal strength were -86, it wouldn't work. Or maybe even if it was -87, it wouldn't work in building, or -96 in vehicle, or -97, it wouldn't work. And part of the problem here is that these are calculated propagation maps. These are not real world measurements. These are what a computer says. And by the way, they're not bad, but most standard setting organizations say there's a plus or minus 5 dB variation in these. And ones that are not verified, as Verizon's are, could be as much as 10 dB. So if what we're seeing here in that red is -96, are you telling me that this wouldn't work? That the green might overlap that? -86, it wouldn't? Here's the problem. It's a matter of significant figures. How closely, how granular do we want to use this? And it's a lovely argument. It's very, very, it's done beautifully. The problem is we get into this situation that is so fine-tuned. Where do we leave precision figures off, and where do we say, what is the accuracy of this entire thing? And I'm sorry, the accuracy is not enough to do this. The whole precision, if you did this with drive testing, we've never seen drive testing, and I've never even proposed drive testing here, because quite frankly, I said in my report, yeah, they need a site there. They do. The question is there an alternative? So now we're in this because, and if you read my last report, you'd also see how my ultimate conclusion is on this. All I'm saying is, just for the record, for my input on this, because I'm not on Verizon's side and I'm working for, and so they can make the correct decision. What do we have here? We have a granularity of 1/3 of a mile of gap of -95. But if it's -96, I guarantee you it will work. -97, I guarantee you it will work because it's insignificant. It's a de minimis difference in coverage, but that's all we're seeing here. And if you
Okay, if I may, we keep making reference to Ron's report that we have not been provided with a copy of. And to my knowledge, the public hasn't been provided with a copy of, and this is a public hearing. And so for the applicant and the public to have the benefit of your professional consultant's opinion, that may help this discussion. I'm hearing a lot of critique of our presentation, But I think what I just heard from Ron is that there's really a de minimis difference between the two locations. And if I'm looking at the draft Monroe balancing test findings that the board prepared, I believe Ron's opinion is right here, even though we weren't provided with it. I think it's restated in this draft findings that the board prepared, which is essentially, there's no real difference in the two locations, but our preferred location is better from a community benefits perspective.
But
So
my
I think that's important for members of the public to hear, in that, first of all, the site that we're proposing is an available site. It's not a hypothetical. This is a property that's available to us. It meets our coverage objectives, and it is within our search area. It is slightly outside of the industrial zone, which is why we applied for the variances, and under the relaxed utility standard variance test, we need to demonstrate a need for the facility at that location. I think I heard from the board, there's really no question that there is a need for enhanced coverage and capacity relief at this location. So if it's your RF engineer's conclusion that there really is a negligible difference between the two locations, and we have demonstrated a need for the facility at the location that we've proposed, I think that that answers the question, and we've established the standard that we need to establish in this case.
But
Well-
just for clarity on that, I'm sorry that you don't have a copy of my report or the first report, where I point out the fact that the de minimis difference between sites is critical in this, and when you Monroe opinion, and that's why I'm working for the municipality, because they have to weigh their decision against their residents, and their residents are going to look at that and say, is there really a significant
Ron disappeared.
difference, or is there another alternative site that would work? And there's no doubt in my mind that there could be an alternative site, but is that site as
Stop
good?
The discussion from the direction that's going, and I appreciate, Allison, what you're saying, but you really, we've only started by looking at the 700 megahertz, which I'm not saying that there's a huge difference in 700 megahertz coverage. I am, however, pointing out exactly where there is a difference and where there's a notable difference. And while Ron's viewpoint is interesting, the way that we identify the different signal strength levels and thresholds and ranges that we use is directly related to Ron's statement. We use these ranges, and these ranges are selected based on years of experience, years of testing, and the known factors which we can't control, which is why I've said in the past, this isn't as simple as a black and white discussion. Do you have coverage or don't have coverage? Everybody would love for you to be able to just see on one map that you do and one map that you don't, but RF signal propagation does not work that way. RF signal propagation is subject to fading, both short-term and long-term fading. You could do a drive test of this area and drive one direction at a certain speed and drive that exact same direction at a certain speed a second time and get two completely different sets of results. That's how RF signal propagation works. And that's why we don't rely on drive testing for this types of application. The areas that we're looking at is so much more detailed than just looking at one road or another from a drive test perspective. There was years and years and years ago, 15, 20, 25 years ago, we used to rely heavily on drive test data. We do not do that anymore because back in the old days, our propagation models were very poor. They were very limited in what they could tell us, and we needed to supplement our information for the decisions that we made. Fast forward to today, we have much more granular data. We have server-based propagation models that can crunch huge amounts of data and give us a much more accurate picture of what's going on in the community. And while there is fluctuations, like Ron says, we have to look at this as a big picture, because it could be people hiking in the woods or hunters or things that are not happening along the roadways that we're engineering the network for, trying to offload that usage. So I would like very much, if I can go to the next sets of slides, which is the 21.
Can I just say something? We have the public here who are real anxious to ask some questions about the industrial zone and your alternatives and stuff.
That's fine, but we can't
So
leave
you
it,
might
we
be
can't
just the
leave the
person to
conversation
answer.
at just 700 megahertz, because that is showing the minimal difference in frequency and works against the arguments that we've made as to why Mount Marion Fire Department is a better location. If you can look at the slides that I've shown here, the differences are drastic, especially in the Mount Marion Park area. So if you look at the alternate Industrial Drive in this case versus the proposed Mount Marion, you can see that there's a huge difference in the ability to serve in building in these areas at the higher frequencies. The lower frequencies, as we had, most of this discussion has been oriented around, is not typically the bandwidth that we have a coverage issue with. That's the bandwidth that we have a capacity issue with. So the fact that I may be able to provide 700 megahertz from each of these different locations with minimal difference does not by itself solve the problem. We have to be able to serve these areas with the higher frequencies, and that's where Mount Marion really makes a big difference. You can see there's extremely large areas. Almost the entire Mount Marion Park is not served by these alternate locations with AWS. And that is a big difference. You also have large sections of I-87 that's not served with in-car coverage with AWS. So I believe that there is a big difference in the locations. I'm on the record as saying so. I provided documentation as saying so. I respect Ron's position, but he can have his position, and I'm here to tell you that there is a difference. There's a big difference in these locations, and that's why we provided the level of detail that we have so that everybody can see that.
Mike, will you please send us hard copies of all of these maps?
The hard
Allison, we
copies
have
don't
not
come from
gotten
me.
them.
They
That's
come
why
from,
we
they
need.
come from Scott's office. So Scott's office has to send those.
Okay, because the public, as Allison rightfully said, would like to see these things. By sending them this online is going to mean nothing to them. You need to have hard copies so that people can come in, look at things. The same thing with the balloon test. We need those hard copies for the board, so we have a way to talk about it without having to toggle all over the place, look at the comparisons. And we have members of the public here who have questions about alternatives. So it would be, I think, while you're here and while you're up, we might want to, Jeannie, are you there? Get to some of the in the public, if they're still here. I know that alternatives were some of the questions that were asked by the people. I don't know if Mr. Biagio is still here. Or is Gina Pearson here?
Let me see if you can hear me. It's Kevin. I can unmute people.
There's Mr. Biagio.
Okay, I'm just going to say those of you who are call-in people, you can mute and unmute yourself with *6. So if you're asked to be recognized, press *6 on your telephone, and you can unmute yourself.
Mr. Biagio, instead of me reading your questions, you're here. Why don't you ask the questions that you sent us?
Sure. So one of the major questions was, and I guess you did a balloon test, but when was that test performed?
April.
In April?
And it was put in the paper, the date of it, with a rain date, because we had a series of rain dates there. It was also put on Channel 23, and it was also on the website.
Okay, thank you. And,
you live very close there, don't you?
I do. I live on the corner of Tower Drive and Glasgow Turnpike.
Okay.
So to Ron's point, you know, the drive tests, I work for an engineering firm, and we do a lot with SCADA systems that require radio communication between water towers and things close to cellular, and a lot of times these models don't work well. So, you know, sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. You can get as granular as you want, but proof is in the pudding. So anyways, one of the questions I had is a lot of these cell towers, they have generators with them. Is this the case with this one?
Yes.
It is. And
Jeannie, can you hear us? She can't hear me, so I'll answer it. Yes.
Okay.
It does. They have said to us that it's very minimal noise. Maybe Allison, you would like to, or Mike, one of you can address that.
Unmute.
Allison?
Sorry, yes.
Can you address the generator?
I don't have precise information about the precise noise level for the generator. I know that it is an emergency backup. It would run, you know, I think maybe once a week for testing, and then only in emergency situations. It would not be a constant noise source at the site location. But I can provide more specific information on estimated noise levels from that. that generator if the board would like.
If I can add that in other cases that I've done, when a board asks the applicant regarding the noise the generator makes, their generators are many different kinds, and they are sold with high-performance mufflers. And if they specify that they would like a high-performance muffler, that would limit the sound to 70 dBA, and that's a measurement of sound intensity that's equivalent to normal conversation if you're not screaming, within 15 feet of the generator. So 70 dBA is quite quiet, but the generator has to be specified with a high-performance muffler. No big deal, easy to do, and then that should minimize anyone's issue with sound because of the generator running.
Biagio, did that answer that question for you?
Yes, it did. Another question I had is, we see these cell towers all the time, and a lot of them don't get kept up very well. So is there a long-term plan where, somebody's gonna watch over this thing and make sure it just doesn't turn into something that doesn't look very pleasant?
Allison?
Yes, there'd be regular routine maintenance on the pole. I don't think it requires much maintenance. This isn't a cell tower. We're talking about a monopole, but certainly we would keep it in operating condition with standard maintenance, and that would only require a few periodic visits from personnel to the site.
And would Verizon be overseeing? They had mentioned that maybe you would lease some antenna space to other cell companies. I mean, would they oversee the maintenance on that as well, or would they be responsible for their own maintenance?
Verizon would be responsible for its own maintenance. It would be up to Tarpon Towers to deal with any additional carriers that would be co-located on the tower.
Who would inspect the installation of the tower?
Who would inspect the installation of the tower?
Right.
We would be applying for a building permit from the town of Saugerties. We would also have, our own engineers overseeing the installation to ensure that it's done in accordance with the plans that are approved by the town and the building department.
So it would be Verizon inspectors?
Verizon would have its own inspectors, and so would Tarpon Towers.
Biagio, one of the questions you asked was, are there other similar installations around? Verizon has several towers in Saugerties that you can just go and look at. One is behind the Centerville station. One is behind Town Hall. There is one at the Malden rest stop on the Thruway, which you can see right from Malden Turnpike. And I understand they've put one in at the Ulster rest stop on the Thruway. So there are a couple that you can go and see what it will look like.
Okay.
Okay. And then, you had a list of other questions. I just want to give you the.
Yeah, that was, yeah. The other main question is, and it's probably more for all of the residents in the area, is the effect it's going to have on the properties as far as property value. I know people aren't going to be wanting to stare out their window and looking at a tower. So I wonder if any consideration was given to that.
Yeah, that's a consideration. You're not the first to mention it. That's generally the first thing that people mention in the question as to why it can't go in the industrial zone where they won't have houses to deal with. All of the people have mentioned that.
Because we're mentioning that it's just outside the industrial area, but if you look at the area, there's very nice homes around this area, and they're all well kept. And
it's a residential area
outside the area.
And I would also just like to note, we are proposing the facility on the fire department property where there is an existing communications tower. So it is also consistent with what's currently on that site.
Well, the tower that's there is nothing like what the tower is going to be from the monopole. We have to be straight with people. There is a tower there, but it's not at all similar to what's going there. And I understand that it's going to be different, but we can't try to fool people that way. That would really not be cool.
No, it's certainly, and It's not what I intended, and I, you know, I guess what I'm saying is that, you know, this is a public utility. The very nature of the use, if we're trying to serve residential areas, it's got to be located somewhere where it is in close enough proximity and it can meet the objectives that we need it to meet, and that's coverage and that's capacity relief. So by the very nature of the facility, it has to be located in proximity to these areas that we need to serve. You know, we have tried to locate the facility in an area that will meet those coverage objectives, but is also, you know, consistent with the community character. And I understand, and I don't mean to, you know, be disingenuous in trying to say it's the same as what's there now. The only point I was trying to make is that, you know, there's obviously a need for a communications facility at this location, and there is one there now. It's in a state of disrepair. It's not high enough to meet the coverage objectives that we need it to meet. And so that's why we're proposing a new tower at the same location.
Will, this is Joe. Will the tower that's presently there be removed?
It's my understanding that we don't have any plans to remove the tower. That's on fire department property. It is still being used by the fire department. I don't know that they have any immediate plans to remove the tower, but if and when they do make that decision, we believe that, you know, they would be able to utilize space on the tower we're proposing now.
So potentially there'll be 2 towers on that property.
Wow.
Yes.
I thought that was the whole
Where
purpose.
exactly
of
on the
this.
property is the proposed monopole going to be?
We couldn't hear you. What was the question?
Where exactly on the property is it being proposed to erect the monopole?
If you go over by the firehouse, they have marked the place where the tower itself is going to go, and then where the fencing around it is going to go. So, you'll be able to see.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Is Jeannie still here, or has she disappeared? She got cut off?
I just spoke with Jeannie. She was having technical issues. They're rebooting the computer. She can join by phone if they can't get that resolved.
Okay, so then in her absence, I'll just continue on. Is
Patty, I have a question.
Tamara
I have a question
Shupin
for
here?
Mike.
Tamara Shupin, she was originally on. Is she here?
Just a reminder that she can hit *6 to unmute herself. Did you have a question, Henry, or a comment?
Yes, I have a question for Mike. Mike, just off top, what is the difference in elevation between the Mount Marion site and Industrial Drive site?
So, but we looked at the different ground elevations. They were about 10 feet difference in ground elevation, with Mount Marion being about 10 feet higher in ground elevation.
No, I didn't ask you that. You're saying that you need the tower height to get the coverage.
The tower height was, when we did the comparison, we used an apples. We talked about this at the last meeting. We said we use an apples to apples approach where we use the exact same site in each location, so we had a true delta analysis. Because we could consider various heights at the existing location as well. We've tried to identify what the minimum height would be to minimize the visual impact to the community. So, and also talking about the other tower, the original intent, when we originally looked at this location, the original intent was to do what we call the drop and swap, which is we go to an existing tower. If we can't locate on it, and in this case, the tower was too short and it was not structurally sound for us to be able to install our equipment. The idea was originally that we would be able to take that tower down and replace it with a new one that would be tall enough and that would be structurally sound. However, there's existing use at the base of that tower, and the Mount Marion Fire Department may correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that there's an existing septic service that's in that location. So in an interest to not disrupt the existing services of the facility, we decided to move it to the closest spot on the property that would work, which is what the current proposal is for. As far as whether that existing tower would come down, I believe that Allison characterized that perfectly. I don't, if the fire department moves over and they don't have any need for that tower anymore, then there really should only be one tower on that property long term. How does that happen in the short term? We don't have that information. That's something that should be discussed.
What
Mike,
the
if I may add
fact
to
that the industrial drive is 10 foot higher in elevation solve a lot of the issues as far as your height of the tower out at the fire company?
I'm sorry, Henry, I didn't understand. You might have broke up a little bit. I couldn't understand the whole thing.
Okay. I said, being that you're saying that industrial drive site is 10 foot higher in elevation than Mount Marion Fire Company, wouldn't that help with the height of the tower?
It's actually the other way around. The Mount Marion Fire Department is actually 10 feet higher than the other alternate locations.
Right.
Really? Than the industrial drive?
Yes. Yep.
That's hard to believe.
If I may make something,
Matter of fact, I know it's actually way hard to believe because the elevation when we did the intersection coming of Mount Marion, Glasgow Turnpike, that was a vertical curve that went up past John Greco's house and right just past Jack Greco's house. To the left is Industrial Drive. So I know I'm going up at least. Well, we took it down about 4 feet. So I know it was a higher elevation than the Mount Marion Fire Company.
So I'll just give you what I can see in Google Earth, and I've got that up on my screen right now. So we were looking at the Tower Road location that was 10 feet lower in ground elevation from Mount Marion.
Not Tower Road, Industrial Drive.
Hold on, I'm trying to get to that. So I'm telling you where the 10 feet came from. The 10 feet came from the Tower Road alternate location, and it's about 5 feet difference, according to Google Earth, for the Industrial Drive location. So it does show, I'm just going off of Google Earth. I don't have surveyed elevations there. And that's the same data sets that we use in underlying data that would be used for calculations.
Listen, all due respect, Mike, Ron pointed out a lot of improprieties, one way versus the other, and he also pointed out the fact that it was going to make a heck of a lot of difference whether it was there or out the fire company.
I believe that it makes a big difference. If you want to take out of context what I presented,
I'm not going by what Ron stated before, and I think it has to be explored. I mean, what Ron said makes a lot more to a layman. What Ron said makes a heck of a lot more sense than what you're presenting, and I know you're trying to do it, but Patty hit it right on the head. Unless you're doing this every day, these things are almost impossible to make a good comparison. I have to tell you, and I've been looking at blueprints all my career. Dan Schuster and we did this here for, Dan's still doing it. I did it for 34 years.
Well, we've provided a very comprehensive answer to the questions that have been asked. If you want to drill into the nitty gritty and skip through all the gray area and just drill down to where the differences lie, look at the differences in the 2100 megahertz. There are significant differences in the capabilities, and that difference makes a big difference as to how that site works and whether we come back because we did the job wrong. If we do this wrong, we're not fixing the problem. We're gonna have to keep coming back. We want to fix this right so everybody can move on and we don't have to keep addressing this problem.
Yeah. I hear what you're saying, but I don't hear what Ron's saying. So that's.
May I just add something to this, if you don't mind, just to clarify my point? Two things. It was my belief and understanding from day one that the tower, the pole, would be a replacement for the tower, and forgive me, Mount Marion Fire Department, but I've seen pictures of the tower that you have, and you would be well served to take that down and to utilize the new monopole that Verizon or Tarpon Towers would build, because
that was my understanding also.
The design of that tower was probably from, and help me out here, the late 70s that went in, was to a different standard, a different wind load standard. And when I saw the pictures of the tower, I said, you know, there was the balancing test that I did. This would be a tower that meets the latest specifications of the EIA with respect to wind speed, ice, everything else, and your antennas would be on there and probably at a pretty good height, number one. Number two, then, why have two towers? So that's always been in my mind why this site has a significant when I say significant, weighing all the facts, a reasonable increase or betterment than any other site because of the good that it brings to the fire department as a public good. So to say that that old tower stays, then that changes my entire opinion on this. And it was my understanding that Tarpon Towers was going to make space available for free, gratis, to the fire department to relocate their equipment there, which would improve their coverage, as well as ensure that the thing would survive. And by the way, also may give them emergency power too, because the generator that Verizon would install would be able to power the Mount Marion Fire Department site. Let me just make that clear, that was so important to me in reviewing these, the balancing test that I have in looking at these. Mike makes a very good argument. The 2100 megahertz is indeed more difficult to provide. That is the fragile service. That's the one where they have their maximum capacity. Once again, I go back to the significant figures and how important is it. And in this weighing, yeah, it really is. They're not, the information provided to the board was not enough to say without a doubt that one is better than the other. Especially, I used 3D topo quads, Mike. I did not use Google Earth. And I found no difference in height between the two locations, depending on where you went on Industrial Drive with the actual 3D topo quad. And the other argument that you make, Mike, is that look at this area that's uncovered. Well, by your maps, I can't see what's there. It could be a swamp. I don't see any cities or towns or major roads except for that one that you point out. In all of these other areas where the dearth of coverage, there may be nothing there. So I weigh that too, in that the evidence of the underlying map was a little shy for the board to do. I'm sorry I didn't see my second report or even look at my first report where I had my conclusions. It's just that I want to make it
Both looked
clear
at the first report that you
that
provided. We got that 10 minutes before
But
the
in
last
here,
meeting.
folks, Kevin, could you look to see if any of the public that had called in are still on the line?
I received a call. I know Tamara wanted to speak. She is.
Okay, she sent in comments, but she would like to speak, and tomorrow we'd like to give you an opportunity to address the board.
Tamara, if you can hear me, do the *6, please. I muted you as I mute all the extraneous and other calls.
Okay, this is Susan Thatcher. Can you hear me?
Yes, Tamara, before you even begin, I want to just let you know that one of the main focuses of your comments had to do with health issues. The Federal Communications Act for cell communications prohibits zoning boards from taking up the issue of health ramifications due to cell phone towers. So I just want you to know that is not something that we include in our discussions. It's not something that we can talk about, basically. So other than that, the floor is yours. You would like to address the board.
Thank you. I have so many things that I did want to talk about. I'm going to try to be brief, and many of them, some of them were answered by other people. Just briefly, I do want to say that I did also find the way the notice was given for this meeting inadequate for me. I found out on Wednesday. I'm someone who reads all the legal notices in the Hudson Valley One to look for things like this, to prepare for them. And I found the notice on Thursday because I wait to get the paper. It's too difficult to read online, the legal notices. And saw that the deadline for written comment was the day before, July 1st, when the legal notice appeared. That was a problem for me, and I wonder how many other people in the public, like me, feel this way. So I just want to make that point. I wish that you had given longer notice, at least a month in advance, so that I could have done more research and more eloquently be able to address my issues. Okay, I'm done with that. Thank you. Okay. Like I said, a lot of my concerns were answered. I will just briefly say about the health issue. My understanding is that it's environmental issues that are disqualified from being discussed in these reviews. and that there is current, what should I say, not legislation, but litigation going on to try to establish that health will be an issue that can be discussed. And that's all I'm going to say about that. Okay. I would like to ask, well, I guess all my questions must be addressed to the zoning board. Did you ask the applicant when was there any discussion about limits, exposure limits to the frequencies coming from this tower and what standard those limits would be measured by? Because there's two standards. There's a general population limit, and then there's an occupational limit. And the occupational limit is much higher because it's designed for people will be working in a place where they won't be there 24 hours and where they can also know to avoid the sources of the radiation in their workplace when possible, versus the general population, which will be exposed 24/7 to this radiation. So have you, are you aware of these two limits, and did you ask Verizon which one they're using?
Ron, do you happen to know the exposure report that you got from Verizon, if it addressed these issues or what address other issues?
Indeed, and when I got the original application back in February of 2019, it did not include what's called a health and safety report. And that's where they hire an independent firm to evaluate the radio frequency exposure in the vicinity of the proposed telecommunications.
Hello? Hello?
Yeah, you're still on, but Ron just disappeared.
Oh.
I reviewed it, and I sent a new report to the board regarding that study. And the study that was done was for non-occupational exposure. And that's just like you and me, we're not working at a tower, we're not on the roof of a building. And that standard is for 24 hours continuous exposure to anything. And the curious thing about that is whether it's 1% or 99% of the maximum permissible exposure, you're okay. It's only when you go to 100 that you have an issue. The occupational standard is, for the record, 20 times higher. So an individual who is working around the tower, who knows about the exposure requirements, that individual is allowed to be exposed to an electric RF field 20 times greater. But that individual can only stay in that area for 20 minutes. And after 20 minutes, that individual has to leave. His body has to, basal temperature has to cool back down, and then he can go back up there. So the occupational exposure would be applied to people who live 500, 1,000, 1,500, 2,000 feet away, or even 75 feet away. That is indeed a non-occupational exposure, and it's incredibly, incredibly safe. There's nothing, and that the commission has said you can't even consider this, but really, I worked my entire life around radio frequency energy, my entire life. And I still have my hair and my teeth, and there's been no issues with me. So I'm not concerned about it.
I thought we're not allowed to speak about health.
All the studies that I have read and done and participated in as a member of committees is these standards are extremely, extremely conservative. And the general public has nothing. What they should worry more about, and I will say this to the lady on the phone, is if you have a cell phone up to your ear, I would be more concerned about the radio frequency exposure you get from that cell phone than you will get from any of these towers. Thank you.
So to answer your question, Tamara, they did, Verizon did submit the report, the exposure report.
Thank you. I did have another, may I continue?
Yes.
Okay, just one more thing. It's my understanding that it is local municipal governments that have the regulatory authority over the operations of these cell towers. Can you explain who will have the operational, the regulatory authority over the operation of this cell tower?
Well, it's not the town. Mike or Allison, do you want to address that?
I think, and I'm sorry, I think the question was, you know, is the town in a position to be regulating the operation of the tower? Is that?
The operations of cell towers, it's my understanding from recent research and recent court precedents, the operations are to be regulated by local municipalities, that they have the right to have the applicant at their own expense hire an independent engineer to measure them at intervals, and the local authority can levy fines. They can even pull the license to use that tower if the radiation exceeds the frequency that was allowed in the original contract. That's my understanding. So with this situation where I'm not understanding where the regulatory authority lies with this tower. Is it the town? Is the fire department an independent government authority? Is it their authority to regulate this? Who's responsible for keeping track of the radiation coming from this tower? Because it's one thing to put it up at a certain level. Who's to stop it from increasing and anybody to know about it unless it's measured regularly? And I believe there is something in the Saugerties Town Code about that. Hold on, if I can find it. It seems it's the planning board has the right to ask this. It's on.
Well, just, you know,
item
kind of
10,
just
monitoring
saying,
and evaluation of compliance.
you know, I'll just say in
Hello?
general, you know, the FCC is the federal agency that publishes these guidelines for exposure limits. And these guidelines for exposure limits have been determined based on, you know, what science says is safe for, you know, the general public. And so as long as we can demonstrate compliance with those guidelines and those exposure limits, you know, we are complying with the FCC regulations. And so that's what we were discussing, what we had demonstrated with the health and safety certification that we provided with our application. Essentially certifying that we are going to be operating within those exposure limits that have been established by the FCC. So having demonstrated that, the question of health impacts from emissions from the cell tower are preempted by federal law, and we are going to be required to operate within those limits during our entire operations of that facility.
Yeah.
But if I may, the FCC does not regulate cell towers under 200 feet. It just doesn't. So by default, that goes to the local municipality unless there's some other unusual situation. I'm not sure how usual this situation is where it seems that authority is being given to the fire department because it's on their property that they own. It's one thing for you, the applicant, to say, oh, we're going to do a certain level of radiation, but I mean, good business practice is that there must be regular testing. You don't just accept someone's word on something, especially as serious as cell phone tower radiation. There has to be some regulatory authority for measuring and keeping control of this.
Tamara,
it looks like it's
the question has been out there, and we'll leave it to the applicant to see if they can give us an answer on this next time, and so that we have an answer for you.
If you'd like me to.
Let me just, this is Dan Schuster.
Oh, yay, Dan.
Let me just respond to the question about monitoring. These town zoning law under the section dealing with cell towers does cover evaluation of compliance, pre-testing and post-testing, and what happens if excessive emissions are discovered. So it is covered in the zoning law. with a series of specific requirements.
Okay. Anything else, Tamara? Are you finished with your questions?
I am. Thank you very much.
Okay,
for giving me
and we're
this
going to
time.
we'll submit for the record everything that you sent to Jeannie, who then forwarded to all of us, okay?
Thank
Is
you. I
there any?
apologize. Some of it's going to be redundant.
Okay, I know
Thank you.
Gina Pearson is not here. I don't think she's here. I just want to read her first paragraph. She just wanted to let you know that she strongly opposes this installation. She lives directly adjacent to the firehouse. We all know her house. We know where she lives because we knew that she was going to be an impacted person. And she's really frustrated that with the zoning law that she has to comply with and others have to comply with, you need to get a variance if you're going to be over a foot over what the regulations are. And the fact that this tower is asking for such huge variances. So she's registering her disapproval and her opposition. And she also asked some questions about health and so forth, but we'll submit her comments. Kevin, is there anybody else from the public here?
Not to my knowledge. Again, there's a couple dial-in users that I'm not familiar with. I just see the numbers, but I would invite them at this time to press star.
Can they hear me if I do a call out? Is anybody from the public here would like to speak to the tower?
I'm going to unmute all the knowns.
Anybody from the public would like to speak?
So there could be one of the fireworks out there
Okay.
tonight.
Is Jeannie back on?
That's it.
Okay.
Fine. That's
Jeannie? Jeannie, are you back?
I am back
Okay.
here for you. I don't know if you can hear me.
I think we finished
Hello?
with the public who had things to say. So I hand it back to you.
Caller. Would like to speak. Hello?
Can't hear.
Can you hear me, Jeannie?
Hold on, I'm trying to get the headphones in again.
Hello, can you hear me?
Who's calling? Who is
Hello?
that? Who is that?
Hi, this is Susan Satcher. I live over on Churchland Road.
Okay, by all means.
How are you tonight?
Good.
This technical stuff has booted me off my cell phone 4 times because we don't have good cell tower usage here. So the need to have a good cell tower, I understand the concerns of having a tower that's so tall and being close to your house. My view of the tower will succeed everyone's view. I am up on the hill and I see everything. So it will be a part of my view for the rest of my life. But I understand that with the technology that we have, that it is now becoming imperative that we have support to be able to have towers so that, like Mount Marion School. I work at Mount Marion School. We have no cell service there. If something bad happens, the electricity goes down. We are very vulnerable. In fact, if electricity goes down, that entire park is very vulnerable, where there's a large amount of people that live. This process has started back in February of 2019, and if I'm correct, it still hasn't been solved. You're proposing looking at properties, which I know where they are. They're still going to be in my view, but they are properties that you don't have permission to put any cell tower on. Whereas the property that's in view, that's being looked at right now, they're giving you permission to put a cell tower there.
It's cheap.
You know, you have no idea if these other two properties that you're considering will ever give you permission. So this will allow our cell tower problem to last even longer. I have parents, Joe and Jeanette Sauer, that live on the Sauer farm that cannot reach my brother that lives next door to me because there's no cell towers. Because the hill is blocking, Mount Marion Hill is blocking the service. So not only is our children at risk, because the longer we make this last, the longer the risk still exists, you know, but you're also considering all these elderly folks that live in our area that may need a call for help and they can't get it because now everybody has gone to cell phones, not me. I still pay for my phone so my parents can reach me because they no longer can reach my brother. So I think it's imperative that we think about, yes, maybe it does inconvenience some things, but when you have considering properties that you have no idea if they'll ever accept putting a tower on their property, and you have an existing property that says put it here, that you really have to consider that.
Thank you.
That's my opinion. My opinion. And
Could you
and
tell
I
us
tell
your
you,
name?
my name
tell
is
us your
Susan
name, please?
Satcher. Spell it, sure. S-A-C-H-A-R.
S-A-C-H-A-R, and your first name?
Correct. Susan.
Susan Satcher.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm telling you, my view will be more of a view obstructed because of where we're up on the hill than anybody that lives next to the tower, because I see the whole horizon over there. And I'm literally a quarter of a mile from Mount Marion Fire Department, you know, so I'll see it.
Thank you very much.
So, all right.
Is there anybody else who would like to speak before we adjourn?
Can you hear me?
Yes, finally, Jeannie.
Good, I am back. I'm sorry. I just want to explain that although the initial application did come in last May of 2019, at that point, Verizon asked not to come back. They did not come back to us again until December of 2019. Then a very inconvenient virus caused a cancellation of one meeting in April, but it was not the zoning board who held things up for over a year. I just want to make that clear, and I don't mean to sound offensive, but I am.
Right, and we also didn't have all the Verizon personnel at the meetings. It was several meetings in before we were able to have Mike join us. And so forth,
Mike was in Texas.
Right. Okay. Jeannie, I think all the public who is here has spoken, but I think we lost people too. So
there's just one other person I would like to ask. The Mount Marion Fire Department, if they have anything they would like to say. I see there's them sitting there patiently.
They're unmuted.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Yep. Okay. Mount Marion Fire Department. Thanks everyone for listening to what we got to say. My only thing is that I got the answer for the fire tower that's here now. It will be going on the new tower per the agreement, just so we know, free of charge. We're just going to be paying for the new cable from A to B. Just so everyone knows, there will be just one tower on our property. To answer that question, that's all pretty much I got. Okay.
Paying for that.
Well,
thank you.
Okay.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak to this?
There's somebody.
There's someone else from Mount Marion. Good.
Yeah, my name is Matt Sauer. I'm Assistant Chief of Mount Marion Fire Department. Been a member here for 13 years, grew up in the community, went to Mount Marion Elementary School. So I got a lot of history here and a lot of love for Mount Marion area. So let me look through here my notes. Obviously, this year's been a number of hurdles due to the ongoing pandemic. And my concern is that we are in 2020 now, and there's a great need for a better communication system. In the fire service, we deal with many issues. Communications is often the one that gets killed. We rely on radios, and they're currently getting outdated with the current towers that we have. And if we can improve upon this, it would be greatly appreciated. Not only the fire department and its members, but also the residents. Also, when radio services are down, we rely on cellular data. We do search and rescue operations. We go into the woods up Mount Marion Point in the dead of night, July 4th, a number of years ago. There was a brush fire on the point. We rely on these communications to keep everybody safe. I believe one of the callers said that there's no cell service at the school. I've looked into this. There is absolutely none.
Right.
I'm a father of 4 children, and I'm also concerned about this day and age. What if there's an active shooter, an aggressive deadly behavior, a school bomb threat? For a parent, this is concerning because you need to be able to reach your kids, know what's going on. I don't think anybody would disagree with that. And if power goes down and we can't reach our kids, that's an issue. People are going to complain about it. Another thing, the Mount Marion Fire Department is also an established zone for the school to retreat to for the students, would supply water, electricity, restrooms. We kind of need to have an upgraded communications center area. And Verizon has done a lot of research on this. They're the professionals. They have, I feel, provided a number of charts and diagrams that, you know, get very specific. They zoom in this small when they really only need to do something much larger. But we're trying to show the nitty gritty, the stuff that affects the people of the community. People call 911. They need to be heard. The residents of our deserve this. To my understanding, the FCC guidelines are with the radio frequencies that would be coming off of this tower, so everybody would be safe as far as I'm aware of. If they propose that this is the best location, then I 100% back them because they are the experts. And if it doesn't get approved, I would seriously be concerned about the interests regarding safety that this town has for its residents and for our responders. And they deserve the best. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Could I ask Mike a question? Matt?
Please.
Matt, and I want Allison to answer this also. I want her to be on record on this.
Jeannie?
When they first came in front of us, originally, Ron alluded to it before, and I'm wondering why no one is picking this up from Mount Marion Fire Department. That tower, their existing tower, the whole premise was that was coming down. They were going to give Mount Marion Fire Company space on that tower, increase their capacity. And now Allison alluded before that, that tower's staying there, and if and when they decide to take it down. And Ron pointed it out. He remembered the same exact thing. So what changed? Allison, why all of a sudden is it Mount Marion Fire Company on the tower?
I'll say I didn't mean to indicate that there was any change in the plan. The new tower would be going up. It would have the ability to hold the fire department's communication facilities, and when they're ready to switch them over, then that's when it would be done. It will provide the benefit in that it does provide them.
That's not what you said at all. You're flip-flopping. You're flip-flopping on. That's not what you said at all.
Henry, if you let me answer. As I mentioned before, we have a term for this. It's called a drop and swap. It's something that happens all the time. We come in, we find these, older towers that for whatever reason, they're not going to work. It makes a lot of sense to do what we call a drop and swap. That was the original intent. Okay. And I say intent because when I mentioned what I did before, it's because I'm not, as the RF engineer for Verizon, I'm not privy to the agreement between Mount Marion Fire Department and Tarpon Towers. Okay. I don't know. I know that was the intent. I don't know how that went down exactly. So I have to defer to Tarpon Towers and the fire department. And the fire department's indicated that they have the ability to go to this new tower, and all they have to do is incur the cost of the cabling. So it sounds to me like that deal is in place. So I don't think there's any flip-flopping. It's just a matter of who's privy to that information, and I'm not one of those people that's privy to that. So I can try to help put these deals together, but I don't sign the dotted line for Tarpon.
I didn't include you in this, Mike. I didn't point you out. I asked Allison and Ron, because Ron remembered exactly the same thing that I did on the original proposal.
Sorry, Henry, I thought I heard my name in there.
The tall guy that came from Verizon, he promised us that they were going to help Mount Marion. They were going to do this for the fire company. They were going to do all this stuff for the fire company by putting the tower there. So now it went from that. Now they have to pay for cable. They have to pay repair. It's not what was presented to us originally.
And I'd just like to again state for the record that I'm obviously, I wasn't at that meeting, but I'm not changing any terms of the deal. The fire department has negotiated a deal with Tarpon Towers. My understanding is that the new pole will be able to house their communication equipment. And my understanding is that their existing tower is in a state of disrepair and old, and it's part of the reason why they wanted to enter into this lease agreement, because they would have the opportunity to locate their facilities on the new pole. And I did not mean to insinuate in any way that position has changed.
May I make a comment? Please?
I want to hear Ron's position on this.
Yeah. Listen, this is a zoning board of appeals meeting, but some issues have come up, especially with the members of the Mount Marion Fire Department, who I can't not the job that they do. I do not know how to put out fires. I know about towers and I know about RF. And for many of you who know, for over 30 years, my wife and I owned a tower in Pauling, New York. We no longer own it. I have no hookups with Verizon, AT&T, Sprint, T-Mobile, you name it. We did it as a public service. I'm appalled when the chief, I guess, said, the only thing we have to do is pay for the cable. Are you kidding me? No, you don't understand. And by the way, Mike calls this a drop and swap. No, this is a BTS. A BTS means build to suit. Verizon Wireless has got search rings all over the Northeast, and they give it to people like Tarpon Towers, Homeland Towers, Utility Towers. And these guys come in and say, oh, we'll find you a site. And sure enough, Tarpon Towers found a site, and they found a willing landlord and a deserving landlord. And here they are. They have to pay for the cable? No, they should get all new radios. They should get hooked up to the generator. They should get rent. More importantly,
they are getting a lease.
Revenue from the next tenant that goes on that pole. And I guarantee you, I haven't seen the lease, and I volunteered, but You know, I'm an RF engineer, but I'm an ex-tower owner, and I know how these guys work. This is a great site for them. It's a great site for the fire station, and that's why I'm in favor of it if you read my report. Notwithstanding the minor differences in coverage, it fills the gaps. It does its job, and the alternatives may be a push, but for the best public interest of your community, this is the site to go. Tear down that old broken down tower, put up a new pole meeting the current standards, give the fire department the top mount on that, not down at the bottom, but up at the top. Give them the cable. What do you mean pay for the cable? Are you kidding me? I mean, please. I'm sorry. I'm out of my, I mean, you're here, you hired me as an RF engineer, but I just cannot stand to see a municipality or a fire department get beaten up. So yeah, read my report. My report says, notwithstanding all of the minor differences, this is the best thing for your community, and I'm in favor of it. Absolutely 100%. I really am.
And I'd just like to state for the record, this is Allison. I requested a copy of the report this afternoon and wasn't provided. I just want to make that clear to everyone. And I appreciate Ron's position, and certainly we agree with it, that we meet the standard, both for, you know, the relaxed utility standard under New York state law, but you know, also the question of the Monroe balancing test, whether, you know, this project is even subject to the town of Saugerty zoning regulation. And I agree with the position taken in the draft findings that the board had put out today. And I believe they incorporate the opinion that Ron has made, even though, you know, we weren't provided with a copy of it, but essentially it says, you know, there's a need for the facility at this location and it provides a public benefit. So I think, you know, not only is the fire department benefiting from this, your residents are benefiting from this, there's a public need for it at this location, and that's the focus of the analysis, both under the Monroe balancing test and under the public utility standard for a use variance. So, you know, I appreciate Ron, you know, finally kind of clarifying that position for the record. I mean, again, you know, we did request a copy of the report and his opinion, but it sounds as though, you know, he agrees with our position.
Because of the community benefit. That was the deciding thing. Am I correct, Ron, that you thought both of them were equally, the industrial drive one and the firehouse towers were equally pretty good, but the community benefit for the fire department is what put it over the edge?
Correct.
For the record, with the evidence that Mike spent a considerable amount of time preparing, and I have no problem with the work he prepared, but my professional opinion was that the differences were so de minimis because of what I call significant figures, what I call the precision of any analysis, were so insignificant that the test, forget about the Monroe doctrine or the Monroe test, but the idea of, is this really needed or not? Indeed, from day one, I said they need a site. From day one, if you read my first report, and Allison, perhaps you came on late, you didn't read my first report, they needed a site. The question was this site in the right place? And that's when I said, how about Industrial Drive? Or how about Tower Drive? Because I used my mapping software, not Google Maps, to look for other locations. And I proposed that, and I saw school buses or dead buses and said, hey, there's a good junkyard, there's a good place to put a tower. Minimum community impact. But you know what? It's not quite as good, but it's almost as good. So what puts it over the top is the community benefit. And I'm pulling for that here. And that's what really, you're absolutely right. My report was based on that. And I'm sorry that I get so, I just, how many of these do I do? And I'm always working for the municipality. And I see what the tower people give these towns and give these fire departments. And I'm seeing these poor guys here have to pay for their cable. What? Are you kidding me? Come on, Allison, step up to the plate and tell towers to do the right thing. Because I know this is a build-to-suit site. You gave them the search ring, they found the site. So that's the least I think you guys can do for this municipality. And indeed, it will give the lady on the hill coverage. It will fill in those gaps in that 1/3 mile area. Not that the other one wouldn't, but you've demonstrated that it would, so I will believe that. But there's my passion here. No, it just I couldn't believe these guys said that. I'm sorry. I got out of my. I'm an RF engineer. That's all I got hired for. And forgive me. And by the way, I'll say one other thing, Allison. Take a look at the FCC report and order of September of 2018. You probably haven't seen that. And that was the report and order that came out and talked about 5G densification and coverage. And that report and order eviscerated this board's authority. No one has looked at that, but I'm just saying that now. It eviscerated it. February 18th, 2000, I'm sorry, September of 2018, a report and order on 5G. It eviscerated any ports for densification or increasing of coverage. And that's what this says. So notwithstanding that, I hope I've helped not confuse things. Sorry I'm so emotional about this, but I really would like the fire department guys to get what they deserve. Okay?
Doug Meyer is there. Doug, did you have something you wanted to say?
Okay, Patty, thank you. Most of you know me, but for those of you that don't, I'm highway superintendent from the town of Saugerties. I'd like to clear something up quickly before I go into the highway department. And I have the fire department behind me only because I'm here. And I don't know where the misunderstanding came from, but the tower that is, the existing tower that is here will immediately be taken down once we're hooked into the new tower, if it becomes a reality. Now, other fire, police, and ambulance, the only other people that are nuts enough to go out in the weather that we do is the highway department. And the issues that I have to echo quite a few of the people that have spoken. There is, at best, very, very poor cell service and complete lack of radio transmissions down here. Now, when I send trucks out, and I can't get a hold of people in the middle of the night, and it happens all the time. It's scary because we go on like 15-minute call procedure to make sure that the trucks are out when we're plowing in a blizzard. And we just don't have it here. So regardless of how it goes, it's something that's truly, truly needed. Sue Satcher brought up about the school. There's no health service or radio communication down there. And it's like sending emergency services, and I'm including the highway department with that. It's like sending it to a dead zone because there is no communications. And I just wanted to bring that point, to you, that we go through this whenever we're out and try to get a hold of people. We can't. So I just wanted to bring that point to you.
All fans, Doug, of the fire department, as you know. As we've said before, we want this to work out. So your point is well taken, and we all agree with you.
Thank you.
And say thank you to the fire department.
Thank you. Okay, Jeannie, it's yours.
Give them the cable.
She say?
I hope you heard that, fire department.
Give them the cable.
Ask for the cable. Tell them you want them to give you the cable, is what he said. Dan said.
Almighty.
I'm not hearing anything from Allison.
I don't have the ability to negotiate the lease during a zoning board of appeals meeting.
Neither does the zoning board.
You're right. Okay, Jeannie.
Okay, I assume that everyone from the board is still here.
Yes.
Joe, are you here?
Yes, I'm here.
And Tim is here. Okay.
Yeah.
I would then ask the board now to make a motion as to whether you wish to close the public hearing. Sorry. Close the public hearing now, or whether you wish to keep it open until our next meeting on August 3rd.
Well,
I
Jeannie,
think
can
there's a
I
lot
speak
of
to that?
unanswered questions, Gene.
I'm sorry?
Myself personally, I believe there's a lot of unanswered questions.
I didn't hear what he said.
I believe we should continue it until the 3rd of August.
And I'll make that motion, Gene. It's Joe.
Joe, the motion
I'll make
is,
the motion.
okay, Patty, I asked for a motion.
Okay. I make a motion that we continue it until August 3rd.
Okay. Can I speak to that? Can you hear me?
I would like a
Yes,
second
go ahead.
first, and then we will discuss it.
I'll second it.
Joe seconds it. Joe.
Okay.
Okay, Henry made the motion, Joe seconded it. Patty is going to speak to it.
There are two things that I think before we close the public hearing that we need to do is to make sure our file is complete and accurate. And so I need to know that we've gotten all the material that we have asked for. And also I take seriously that when Ms. said that she didn't have enough time. If she was one, there might have been others that didn't have an opportunity to speak. And I know there were a lot of people signed up and they just kind of frittered away. So I'd like to start off the next public hearing, giving people an opportunity to speak first so everybody can be heard.
Exactly right, Patty.
Yes. I have several conditions if we vote to keep the public hearing open until August 3rd. First of all, the deadline for any written submissions for the August 3rd meeting is July 22. 2. Notices for the public hearing will be in Hudson Valley 1, which is our weekly local newspaper, on the town website and public access channel 23 beginning next week, which should give 3 or 4 weeks notice to everyone. And we also would, if we postpone the meeting on August 3rd, we will discuss and vote upon the Monroe determination draft.
Okay.
Okay. So we have a motion from Henry, a second from Joe. Patty, how do you vote for August 3rd?
Yes.
Yes. Holly? Raise your hand.
I was muted. Yes, I vote yes.
And Tim? Are you still here, Timothy?
He's here. Well, I see it.
I see. Tim, how do you vote on keeping the public hearing open until August 3rd meeting? I'm sorry, Tim, can you repeat? Once more, let's try Tim.
Oh, well.
He has a bad connection.
He's not muted?
No, there's an icon on the top left that shows that he has a low bandwidth or computer issues.
Ah, okay. Thank you. All right. We have a one. Henry is not voting on this motion. We have 4 votes, including mine, to keep open the public hearing until August 3rd.
So did Joe vote yes on that as well?
Joe voted yes.
Yes, he did.
Okay, has everyone on the board been heard from? All right, we can say good night to all our loyal attendees unless you wish to hear us vote on the minutes of the last meeting. Otherwise, you are perfectly free to leave.
Good night.
And it was nice meeting you.
With our thanks for attending.
Thank you.
Pass on your minutes.
Hi, Bacio.
Everyone from the Mount Ryan Fire Department, we want to thank you. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you for being there.
Thank you. Good night.
And for everything you do.
You're welcome. Our pleasure.
Get tougher with Verizon.
I'm sorry? Missed that, Henry. Okay. Okay, the only thing is, unless someone on the board has anything they would like to discuss now, I will take the motion to approve the minutes of the June 1st zoning board meeting.
I have a couple of edits.
Good, okay.
In the second paragraph under old business, what's the Cochran House?
Actually, that's where Sue Sacker lives. It's the brick house on Church Lane Road.
Okay, so there is such a thing as that? Okay.
Yes, there is.
I didn't know what that was. Okay.
And they did indeed do a balloon test from that. Whether it was accurate or not, I don't remember. And you had something else?
Yes, on the second page paragraph, Patty asked about S34, S34, which she says, S34 says it will not be visible. I think there's an extra says in there. It just reads really weirdly.
So if we delete the second says.
Yeah, that's fine. And then midway, a little bit more, about 2/3 down, says Scott asked that the ZBA could hold a single public hearing for the balancing test, and instead of but, and also the project in general. So it should be an and rather than a but.
And, okay, that correction.
And then on the final thing on that page, Patty was not comfortable with the wording. I would say that it was never tested. I would say the wording considering alternatives in the industrial zone since it was never tested.
So how would you word it?
Patty was not comfortable with the wording that it was never tested. The wording, they didn't say in there that it was never tested. She was not comfortable with the wording considering alternatives were never tested. That was the issue. And that's it.
Okay, so with those corrections, do you make a motion to accept the minutes?
So moved.
Do I have a second? A second from Joe. Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. And Henry, you can vote on that. Aye.
Good night, all.
Now is your turn, your chance to make a motion. Unless anyone else has anything else to say?
Yeah.
Make a motion to adjourn? Is that Tim?
Yes, that was Tim.
Tim is back. Just in time to make a motion to adjourn. Tim has made the motion. Second.
Joe, make the motion. I'll second it.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Good night, all.
Good night, Jeannie. When you
Good night.
disappeared, were you able to hear things, Jeannie, or did you just
could
disappear?
hear, but you could not hear me.
Okay.
And all the pictures disappeared. It's
all right.
Had a message
As
on the
long
top
as you
of the
could hear what people were saying, it's okay. Okay.
on some of it. Not all of it.
Jeannie, I will get you the link. I will
Okay,
get
good
you the
night,
link to the video.
everybody.
You
Good
get
night.
the, yes, thank you. And we'll
Bye.
talk about whether we can get
Bye,
those
Patty.
on channel 23.
Yeah, I'll take care of the 23 and I'll make sure the
Sorry?
notice goes out.
Okay,
Hudson
Henry.
Valley one.
Okay, we'll talk about it because I want to make
Yeah.
sure it says exactly what we want it to say this time.
Very good. All
Okay?
right, Jeannie. Very good. Good
Thank
luck.
you so much for tonight.
No problem. You take care.
Okay, you too.
All right, thanks. Bye.
Good night. Get out of here. This one?